Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are. Catherine Mattice here with Civility Partners, and thrilled today to have the great and amazing Dawn Finn. Dawn's got a great story. I'll let you share it, Dawn. But ultimately, you were a trial attorney, and then you had some epiphanies and decided you could live a happier life, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, long story short, you hear my Bronx accent, and I grew up kind of inner city. And in order to be the family hero, you become my son a lawyer, my son a doctor. So I became my son the lawyer. Mm-hmm. And you're supposed to then represent us, not them. So when I was out here in California, I moved out here when I was 20. I decided I would represent poor, victimized employees and sue those dastardly, villainous bosses, right? And that was my world for 20 years almost. And at the end of my litigation career, I was representing nuclear power plant whistleblowers out of San Onofre and Diablo Canyon. And then so my life turned into a John Grisham novel for 6 years. And I kid you not, it was just insane. Killed the marriage. I spent way too many hours fighting those cases, not enough time at home where I should have been. Mm-hmm. And then I had never lost a case I took to trial, and they wouldn't let me try those cases because I would never had to have worked again. And so after 6 years of appeals and not getting into a courtroom, my clients finally said, enough of this. It's not worth it. We want to get back to living our lives. Mm-hmm. And I said, me too. And that's when we settled for what we could get. And I quit litigation completely.
Okay.
And so then I started, just like divorce attorneys can tell people what not to do in their marriages, employment law attorneys can tell people what not to do in their employment relationships. And so that was the beginning of my work, was the auditing side and, all that compliance, the handbooks and things like that. And then I built, which is really relevant to today, I built probably the first HR mastermind group in the United States that I'm aware of. And so you're familiar with Vistage, the CEO group. I've spoken for them 400 plus times.
Wow.
They used to be called Tech, and a woman, Marty Pilecki, was the head of HR. And she goes, I'd like to be in a group just like the CEOs are in. If I help you pull together the top 15 HR people, would you chair the group? And I said, absolutely. So you had the head of Qualcomm, Illumina, a lot of companies like that. And I ran that for 5 years. We met every month for half a day for 5 years. And I turned it over to Tom and Gracia in town here, who you probably know. Okay.
Of course.
And so the learning that came out of that was phenomenal. And the learning that, between my compliance and the learning that came out of that, at the same time, the internet showed up. And I was one of the first companies to put all that stuff online. And I called it HR That Works. I eventually had 3,500 companies using it. And then I sold it to Think HR in 2014, where I worked up there for 2 years. And so since then, I've been doing the LinkedIn training like you, a lot of public speaking and coaching. That's where I spend most of my time today.
Love it. What a cool story. And maybe not totally relevant to HR, but how in the world did you, as a business owner, I'm always curious about growth. How in the world did you get up to 3,500 companies using? Was that just a lot of great marketing and referrals?
Leverage. One of the things I learned going to Jay Abraham workshops way back when, he's a good marketing guru, is to leverage yourself. And so I approached insurance brokers and I said, I've got an opportunity for you to have value added to compete in sales. And I white labeled everything we did for that insurance agency. So I got 80 insurance agencies out of that 3,500 users using the program. And I didn't want to work more than 40 hours a week. And I got myself down to working 35 hours a week for 12 years straight.
Wow.
And the other time was all learning currency because I'm just a curious freak, and I want to learn. I read voraciously. And I go on these deep dives, and it allowed me to really go on some very deep dives around time and around where the future's taking us and around energy and some of the stuff I talk about. So that was the beauty of not overwhelming yourself, is you get time to do things you're curious about.
Yeah. You get to do things you love, relax a little, get curious and read. Yeah. I have 2 young kids at home, so I don't have a ton of time to get curious. I have a giant list of books that are I need to start reading.
You know how I handled that? First of all, I learned how to speed read. So I ended up reading a book a week for over 30 years. I ended up speed reading to learn how to do that. But I also did those book summary things and the books on tape. So auto university, as I like to call it. I was listening to books driving around all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That helps. So obviously a big challenge HR has faced lately is getting through COVID. And I really think HR has had a chance to shine. So if anybody in HR didn't really lean on this last 18 months to really prove their worth, that was a missed opportunity. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on what challenges HR face in terms of, maybe how they're performing or what they need to be working on?
So look, the external challenges is not hard to guess at, right? The return to work, the hybrid workplace, vaccinate, don't vaccinate, all of that. And there's never-ending literature on that right now. And my response to my clients is, look, I'm not going to advise you on that. You get an active practicing employment law attorney and really know what your state or county OSHA guidelines are. The information is readily apparent. Just get into the information and use it. The people that think HR have put together great resources to go through all this whole thing. And I'm still a big fan of theirs. Plus, I still have 40% of my stock in it. So, and they just renamed themselves Mineral, which was a very interesting thing that they did. I'm like, okay, let's hope that works. So the external is that, but I've done 9 Vistage presentations in person in the last 5 weeks. Every one of the companies is doing well, top of the line. Every one of those companies is finally going up, and every one of them is having challenges hiring people.
Yep.
So, and coupled with the challenge of hiring people is the wage inflation going on. And it touched off by the general inflation going on. Okay. So that whole business of supporting the sudden growth is probably, outside of the compliance thing around the COVID and the hybrid workplace, supporting the current growth is really what's most important to those CEOs right now. Okay, because they're not worried. Their brains are not wired to cost savings. They're all about revenue generation. And if you're viewed as somebody to help support revenue generation, then you're viewed differently.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I've seen this, the Great Resignation, the Great Recession, and now we've got the Great Resignation where everybody's fleeing their jobs, and now it's hard to get talent in, and employees are really demanding about what they're looking for.
I've been on this planet long enough to know that there's cycles, right?
Yes, exactly.
And so right now we're in this whole business of people still feeling, using the word feeling, what happened in the pandemic and reacting to that emotionally more so than logically. But sooner or later, people are going to need jobs. And it's going to be interesting pull and tug of some companies saying, well, if you're not going to come to work, then we don't want you. And other people say, if you're not going to leave me at home, I don't want you.
Right.
So we're going to have that pull and tug, and it'll settle out because people need to get paid. All right, people need jobs. And the marketplace will end up determining over the next 6 months, because everybody's getting off this unemployment and stuff like that they've been on. That gravy train is ending. And people are going to need income. And I don't care if you don't want to go to the office and hang out with your cat all day, if that's what I want to stay home with my cat. So I make a lot of cat jokes, but I just want to be with my cat, well, you might have a hard time getting a job.
Yeah. We actually have a great question here. Francesco, sorry if I said your name wrong, says, do you think HR needs to encourage employers to raise salaries at this stage?
I think they don't have a choice. So when I look, I just had a coaching call with one of my clients a little while ago in Florida. And first of all, most business owners don't have a compensation philosophy. And if anybody wants to contact me, I'll send them the white paper. You can see it on my website about having a compensation philosophy. So the first question is, are you trying to pay people as little as you possibly can? and they're going to work as little as they possibly can not to get fired, right? So when you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, right? And so the question is, where do you view yourself in the marketplace in compensation? Some companies say, we're only hiring the top 10, 25%. We're going to pay accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's the first question, is really, what's your philosophy about money?
Mm-hmm.
Then the second thing is, a fair day's wage is what people look for. You and I have both seen a million surveys about compensation. And when somebody gets paid a fair day's wage, money drops as a motivator, 6th, 7th, 8th place in almost any of those surveys, right?
Right.
But what's a fair day's wage? What the marketplace says it is, not you. And the challenge that we can get in is, you're paying, I'm just using numbers, paying somebody $20 an hour that's worked for you for years. Now you have to hire somebody new because the market's changed to $25 an hour, and you pray to God that they don't talk to each other, right?
Right. Yeah.
And of course, the NLRA says you can't make them not talk to each other. So to think that they're not going to, that cat's not going to come out of the bag. So the first thing is to look at what's the market rate. Mm-hmm. Then other people will say, okay, I'll give you a raise to a consumer price increase. Well, right now that CPI is just skyrocketed, right? Mm-hmm. And so are we going to do a CPI increase? Otherwise, what I'm paying you is worth less than it was a quarter ago. 5% less than 1/4, 5%. Annual rate, 1/4. So in order to retain and attract, you're going to have to put a little more juice into the system. No doubt about it.
Right.
That helps, Francesco. If not, ask another question.
Yeah. Well, and is that compensation philosophy paper, is that pretty easily accessible on your website?
I've got a bazillion free tools. So
okay. Yes. We'll make sure we get that posted as well. Yeah. And then Rohit says, I concur, since the benefit of work from home has been extended for over a year, to replace it, compensation needs to appreciate. Yeah.
And you see what some people are actually doing. So if you were getting a combat pay for working in downtown San Francisco and having to live in that environment, and now you moved out to Fresno, they're actually cutting some of your pay.
Right.
Some companies are saying, hey, we're rolling it back. Yeah, we're giving you battle pay for being in this environment, but now that you're not in that environment, we're not going to pay the premium anymore.
Yeah. I've been hearing lots of people say, in San Francisco, I spoke to 2 people yesterday who are like, it used to take me 2 hours to get there, and I even kind of enjoyed that commute. I got some time to myself, but now they're realizing, no, I really don't want to do that anymore. I'm done. And
I have been adamant about, I have never lived more than 15 minutes away from where I've worked. That's been a thing for me always.
Oh, amen. I could walk to my house if I absolutely needed to. It's a little far, but yeah, I'm with you. I like to live and work in the same area. So what are some things, I know a big part of what you do is coach leaders around kind of upping their game and mentally being in the right space and having all of the right energy to do their best and be their best. So what are some of the tools that HR can be thinking about in that realm?
Okay. So I've interviewed, interestingly, Vistage. When I got out of Think HR, I went to Vistage and said, HR people always want to be strategic. They want a seat at the table. Would you let me do a skunk work in Vistage for HR group? And so I thought everybody would jump on it because I'm offering them the exact same table the CEOs have.
Right.
And I interviewed over 200 HR people, and the difficulty of recruiting HR people, I could have recruited CEOs easier and faster, is a fact. And so I learned a lot about what's going on emotionally about HR people. And I wrote a little book about it, The Truth About HR and You, which is also on the site. You can just download it. And I noticed 2 things that I think are only accelerating recently. Number one, everybody said they couldn't spend the time to be in a group that would actually improve them, take them to another level, just the same reasons the CEOs are in, because they're all on overwhelm.
Oh.
So the Zeitgeist, the German word for spirit of the times, the Zeitgeist is, first of all, everybody in HR is on overwhelm. Okay, which is nonsense. And one of those deep dives I did was in time. I read 12 books on time management, wrote some books on time. and got myself out of my own nonsense about time, and so that I'm never been stressed about it since. And if I followed any of those HR people, and I followed any of you folks listening to this around during the day who are all on overwhelm, how many times would I find you doing $20 an hour work?
That's a great point. Yes.
And the answer is way too much. You're getting paid $100,000 a year. That's $50 an hour work, and you're doing $20 an hour work. Really?
Yeah.
And you haven't figured the math around delegating that and saying, hey, look, boss, if I delegate 2 hours of $20 an hour work and replace that 1 hour $50 an hour work, everybody wins.
Yeah.
Okay. So that whole business about knowing where your time goes and shedding low value work. So one of the first things I'll do with my clients is have them track where their time goes, right out of Peter Drucker 101, know where your time goes. And when you start labeling as A activity, this is my $50 an hour work, B activity, it's really making sure other people do their work, and C activity, a waste of time, $20 an hour work being a waste of time, right? Then you start really changing how you use your time, and you can get yourself out of overwhelm. Very hard to be strategic, very hard to grow, very hard to be balanced, very hard to do any of those things if you're working over 50 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think from a psychological standpoint, I speak straight up about stuff. So, 70% of HR is women. Okay. And many of them are single moms. And job security is number one for them. They need a sense of security. And I think psychologically, they believe that if I'm on overwhelm, I have job security.
Okay.
Who would fire anybody on overwhelm?
Right. I'm so important. I've got all this stuff.
I can't believe you. I'm not taking care of my health. I'm not nurturing my family. But hey, I got job security because I'm on overwhelm. Right. Nonsense. Cut it out. Stop it. You remember that old video where the comedian is going, Bob Newhart is going, stop it. Anyway. So the overwhelm is the first thing that I've noticed. Okay. The second thing that I noticed is a sense of underappreciation. And that's been throughout HR for many, many years. I've been dealing, as you know, with HR for a long time. And the sense that I'm afraid to ask for membership in this group, or I'm afraid to ask for this, or I'm afraid to ask for that, because I'm really not appreciated. I'll go speak at an HR group and say, raise your hand if you've asked for a raise in the last year.
Oh, I bet most people do not raise their hand.
Almost nobody. Well, I haven't got one in 3 years, and I find it, or I got a new job. But, really knowing your value, being able to express your value, and demanding a return on investment for that value, right, they're very afraid to do. And it reminds me of the Byron Katie quote. I love people with two first names, Byron Katie, Lord, save me from the need to be loved and appreciated by others. Amen. Okay. So if you sit there, puppy dog, waiting for the CEO to notice you or somebody to notice you, you're going to lose.
Yeah. That's for sure.
And again, this is me. When I build groups, and I'm building another HR group, I want people who want to kick ass in HR in my group. That's it. No
Can I be in your group, Don? Can I be in it? Can I be in the group?
The Renaissance.
Alan posted the link to the Bob Newhart comment that your example. And I want to add to that, because I think, I want to add to everything you're saying. I think people don't necessarily value themselves the way that they should. So you see people, like what's that saying about being pinching versus, thinking about your time. So if you're one of those people who'll drive halfway across town to save $5 on something, buying on Craigslist versus buying it, right then and there while you're at Home Depot or what have you, that how much is that time worth that you just lost to go and save $5? And I'm with you in the delegation thing. It's like, sometimes it's like, I'm going to just spend that money so that I can get it done because my time is valuable. So I think part of what you're saying has to do with our relationship with money as well, and valuing our time.
Absolutely. You got to buy your time back. There's
Yeah.
no doubt about it, and you can do that. And, I use Upwork. I use Upwork for a lot, and it'd be amazed how much productivity I get out of people at $10 an hour. They're very happy. They're in the Philippines where the minimum wage is less than $5 an hour. I'm paying them $10 an hour. They're happy as can be. They're productive. They're responsive.
Right.
And so I get, so the idea of I can't find anybody like that. Well, you're looking at a small world of finding that.
Yeah, the world is flat. Look outside your area. Rohit says he wants to join too. So sorry, I may have opened.
It'll be in person in San Diego. So if I get enough requests from an online group, we'll consider doing that.
All right, you hear that, everyone? If you want an online group, you've got to start commenting there, and we'll get Don to do it.
They can. I'm easy to find. So, the other thing, so that business about the underappreciation is the second thing. And the third thing that I really try to help HR to understand is how they communicate their value.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay.
So the experience I've had with all those CEOs, first of all, many of those CEOs will bring the HR person with them to the meeting so they can hear me yap too. They'll as a guest, right? Mm-hmm. And I do a little exercise, which is so enlightening. I'll have the CEOs write down what they believe are the 3 most important strategic objectives of the person sitting next to them, the HR person. The HR person, without looking at their list, is going to write down what they believe are the 3 most important things.
That's a good exercise.
They have never once matched.
Right, I bet.
Never once matched. And I said the lack of clarity, and the reality is HR is the most poorly managed executive position because nobody wants to manage them. Nobody knows how to manage them.
And I think a lot of times people don't really know everything HR can do and should be doing. It's like we're still pulling ourselves out of the personnel thing, that benefits and payroll is one very teeny tiny, albeit important piece of what HR does. I think that's part of it too. It's just not, how do you manage it?
They don't know the world of HR. So to expect them to know what your opportunity is, so you got to be the boss whisperer, right?
Yeah.
You got to let people know what the opportunities are. And one of the things that we get caught up in the world of HR is about saving costs for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The cost of a turnover, the cost of hire, the cost of all these things. We're going to save cost of benefits. We're going to save cost.
Right.
I have never met a CEO who is more interested than cost and revenue. Never.
Right.
So you're yapping costs, sales, and marketing come in, revenue. Whose attention? Both sides of the brain light up instead of just the logical side of the brain. The emotional side of the brain lights up when they talk revenue.
Right.
So I want my HR people, and one of the things I teach both the CEOs and HR people is the math around HR, and to really understand what the cost of turnover is. To really understand, we did this in that group that I put together, and there's turnover calculators on my site you can grab. So really understanding the cost, but then taking it the next step to understand the revenue equivalencies of those costs. Mm-hmm. So I spoke at 2 CPA conferences. I said, look, it can't be an ROI, because if you lose 50 grand on a bad hire, you have to bring in new revenue to put that 50 grand back in your pocket. It's not an ROI factor of, say, 10% because you got fixed overheads no matter what. So it's really a replacement revenue factor. And those CPAs told me it's in a range of 4-to-1 to 7-1. So if you make a poor hire that costs 50 grand, you'll now have to bring at least 200 grand top line after taxes and sales and marketing and commissions and everything that's taken out of that money to get back to the 50 grand.
Oh, wow.
That's conservatively. Some companies, it's more than that, all right? You're working at a supermarket that's got a 2% ROI, the number's even worse, right? Mm-hmm. So understanding that, so you can communicate to them that way, and then turning those dollars, those revenue dollars, into actual activities. So to bring in that 200 grand, we'd have to build 5 more homes. We have to get 500 new patients. We have to do this. So we actually can get very visceral. And now you're talking to them about stuff that really matters to them. Because they're thinking in their head, I got to build 5 more homes.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you're meeting them at where they are. So quick example, one of my coaching clients here in San Diego, you would recognize the company. I'll keep it out of it. They have a large call center and they had a $1 million turnover problem in the call center. Call centers are notoriously high turnover, right?
Right.
So we said, what kind of realistic dent can we put in this? And we shot for 20%, and we got to 20%. So off the top of the head, it's a $200,000 savings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I said, I want you to speak to the CFO and understand what the ratio is at your company. And it was $1 million. Okay.
Wow.
So in order to replace that 200 grand, they'd have to bring in $1 million new revenue. I said, what happens to salespeople at your company that get $1 million, bring in $1 million in revenue? Oh, they get trips. I go, good. We're going to get you a trip. She spoke to the CEO. The CEO bought her a 10-day vacation in Fiji and one of those huts over the water on Travel Magazine for her and her husband.
Wow. There you go.
There you go. Now all of a sudden, she's viewed so differently. She's been going up in the ranks. Like she's even moving out of HR to even more strategic roles at the company. Mm-hmm. And it's all because she went for it and really understands the whole of it.
Right. So that's a key piece for HR is still struggling to understand all of the business behind HR. And I have a course on LinkedIn about HR metrics to help you kind of get there. Don has a course on employee engagement to help you get there. So there's a lot of resources out there, but really putting on your business hat is how, and thinking like a CEO is how HR is really going to get to where they're going. And if you
want to be strategic, that's what you got to do.
Yeah. And if you see yourself as valuable, then your CEO is going to see yourself as see you as valuable as well. So delegating and all of those things are all tied in together in this conversation. So Don, we're at the end of time. I appreciate you being here with me. I could talk to you. We got to have lunch because now I'm like, we can have a part 2 and a part 3. You can reach Don at donfin.com. I'm definitely going to go and find that compensation philosophy white paper and stick it here in the chat later today. So thanks, Don, so much for being here with me.
Yeah, and just a quick aside, there's the other website. I kind of separated my websites at this point. One is Don Finn, the other one is greathr.com, and there's a bazillion HR tools on that as well. Okay.
Greathr.com.
Yeah.
I'm posting it right now. Greathr.com. Awesome. We've got Marlene says, good interview. Thank you very much. And we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great. Thank you very much.